Вы мне тогда рукой махните, что можно начинать. Коллеги, мне дали условный сигнал, поэтому можно начинать. Сейчас тут чуть-чуть подальше, чтобы не слишком эхо было. Я вообще думаю, что все, кто сегодня дошли, они большие герои, особенно те, кто на сцене находится, что воздух тут такой чистый, свежий, он, то, что называется, опьяняет. Вот, поэтому очень сложно было всем дойти. Ну и в зале тоже, коллеги, вам спасибо, что пришли. Собственно, вас всех приветствую на сессии, она у нас интересная, называется «Уникальная экология как фактор и ограничение устойчивого развития. Евразийские практики, опыт Индии и России». Ну, наверное, неспроста мы здесь. Республика Алтай, она определила экологию как стратегический путь своего развития, и мы видим, что последовательно республика работает над формированием культуры, экологичного отношения к природе, бережного отношения к окружающей среде. И замечательно, что мы вот эти вопросы будем обсуждать в этом пространстве. Меня зовут Игорь Каратецкий, я являюсь партнером компании CAPT, отвечаю за операционные риски устойчивого развития. Ну и сегодня я постараюсь смодерировать эту сессию. У нас, ну, с учетом количества участников, мне кажется, у нас получится такой, можно сказать, даже семейный, что ли, семейный такой в узком кругу обсуждения. И мне кажется, это даже хорошо, потому что можно обсудить на сцене, можно вовлечь коллег из зала. У нас, потому что в конце мы оставим время, чтобы, то, что называется, был интерактив. Мы видим, что в целом в мире это не только российская история, экология последнее десятилетие получила, ну, наверное, сказать, наибольшее внимание, и все пытаются придумать способы, как добиться, ну, то, что называется, экологически сбалансированного социально-экономического развития. То есть, ну, это, в принципе, это лежит в повестке устойчивого развития, как так развиваться, чтобы оставить мир будущим поколениям. Вот сегодня как раз мы в рамках нашей сессии, у нас сессия будет из 2 частей состоять, мы как раз и обсудим вопросы, вот как развивать регионы, как их экономически развивать, но при этом не вредить природе. На что мы должны обращать внимание? На воду, на биоразнообразие, на климат. Какие ключевые моменты вообще с точки зрения регионального развития должны стать во главе угла? И как в целом капитализировать природное богатство региона, особенно если этот регион является экологическим донором? Но прежде чем мы перейдем к дискуссии, позвольте я всех наших участников, спикеров представлю. Если выражаете, я зачитаю по бумажке, потому что фамилии сложные. И я в алфавитном порядке, без должностей. Рядом со мной Боболев Сергей Николаевич, заведующий кафедрой природопользования экономического факультета МГУ, Клепач Андрей Николаевич, главный экономист Государственной корпорации развития ВБРФ, доктор Дебасиш Нанди, доцент Департамента политических наук и госуправления Университета имени Джавахарлала Неру, Суман Свейн, президент Евразийского фонда Индия, Маной Кумар Тиотия, доцент, специалист по целям устойчивого развития, климатическим изменениям в городской среде, Дая Шанкер, специалист по экологическим проектам Индийский институт технологий, и Евгений Аркадьевич Шварц, руководитель Центра ответственного природопользования Института географии РАН и член Совета директоров.
With Andrei, so that he could lay the background for the discussion. I've looked up the statistics on web, and you're planning to spend 19 trillion rubles until 2030 for projects related to infrastructure. And importantly, and I think everybody's aware of it, web has quite a few standards, methodologies, and practices aimed at implementing the responsible implementation of these projects in structural investments, green taxonomy, etc. So web has many things in place. I'm just trying to say that web probably pioneered these practices of considering the social and environmental aspects in their development projects. And now the social component is probably one of the key considerations for the Russian Federation corporations overall. So my question to you is, right now, what is a priority, the priority, I think, in terms of responsibility, and what challenges has WebRF been faced with in the implementation of these responsibility projects, given the topic of our today's discussion? Thank you. Maybe we could pull up the next slide, please. Yes, flip one more. Okay. So Web is not just a bank, it's a state corporation. There are things more important than, the total budget of a project, whether it's 19 trillion or 20 trillion rubles. It's a matter of the goals of the project and the changes we bring about to the world as a result of our activities. And another question is, why are we here together with our Indian colleagues? The answer is because we are probably two largest powers. Russia is the largest one in terms of territory and maybe in the strength of its spirit. And India is also a most ancient state, and we know that it's most populous. And in this respect, we are faced with a special responsibility for sustainable development goals. They were declared quite a while ago, and sometimes these are just mere statements to people. Nobody will object to them. I mean, everybody wants nature to be nice and the population to be healthy, but it has to be integrated into our real life and into every day that we're living. And maybe one of the key problems here is that having declared these goals, humanity, especially in the past few years, riddled with COVID and the geopolitical conflict of the day, has been farther away from the implementation of these goals than 4 to 5 years ago. I will not comment on all the indicators here, but it is well known that COVID itself, according to some estimates, extinguished about 7 million lives. And WHO says it's up to 30. It's comparable to the Spanish flu of 1918, 1920. It's a huge lesson to all of us, because medical care systems differ a lot across the countries, but everybody still was stricken pretty badly. And we must be prepared for disasters of this kind to repeat themselves. We need to think of how to create medical systems or maybe lifestyle changes that enable us to be prepared and avoid the huge losses of the past few years. The problem of famine About 800 million people are undernourished. And the number of those that are undernourished in the world has not been decreased recently. It's been increasing, in fact. But humanity is such that about 50% of the food that is being made in developed countries is just wasted. You know, about 1/3 is wasted during the cooking process. So it's not just a matter of, you know, bringing food to the table. It's also a matter of making it useful and making it healthy. According to FAO estimates, by 2050, the demand for food will grow by about 1.5 times, primarily through the growth of population of Africa by 2 or even 2.5 billion people, Africa and Asia actually, and we are not prepared for this. Of course, there's the question of poverty. Both China and India have been quite successful in cutting down on poverty rates, but through the slowing down of economic growth and the growth of food prices recently, the number of the poor has been increasing again. And with the environment, there is no single indicator to show how it's doing. But in principle, environmental situation in terms of waste and pollution, in terms of depletion of soils and depletion of biodiversity, aquaculture has only been deteriorating. Next slide, please. And in this regard, there are common goals. I would not restate them. There are 17 or whatever SDGs of the UN, but every country, especially a country as big as Russia or as India, must adjust these approaches to the implementation of SDGs in their own way. So today's dialogue is just a part of this attempt to share the expertise and experience and the understanding of SDGs. Our two great states and overall BRICS and SCO countries, the BRICS that has been extended, and need to realize what kind of collective responsibility we bear for SDGs. Maybe we need to rethink not just the SDGs themselves, but the approaches to their implementation, because without a real roadmap, they are just declarations. So based on what we're doing in Russia, unlike in European states, where they have Glasgow and Kyoto protocols going to low carbon development. In Russia, the social welfare is much more high on the agenda, public health and the health of the environment, because they are intertwined. And speaking about initiatives, you know, there is the abbreviation of ESG, the well-known 3 letters, but what will reflect the specific features of our approaches, Indian approaches, Russian approaches? Some will come up with 5-letter abbreviations, etc. But as the great writer of Russia, Solzhenitsyn, said, the main thing is to preserve nature and preserve the population. The environmental agenda has been very pressing for Russia as for all countries, but since we signed the greenhouse gas agreement that's not reduced to CO2 only with horizons for 2050. For us, the environmental agenda is a very broad one. And clean air is probably on top of it. There are 20 cities, according to our roadmaps, that are supposed to cut down on air emissions. There's also the matter of clean water. And for the whole humanity, a shortage of clean potable water is a very acute one. Thankfully, we're blessed with a lot of water in Russia, but there are different qualities to it. And our ecologists think that about 50% of the water drunk by the population is below the standards of quality, in fact. And we have the national project Ecology that's being implemented already in Russia. Right now, they are preparing a new edition of it to extend it until 2030. And probably a new national project will be launched to cover water bodies of Russia. Will envisage restoration of the water resources of the Volga, the Don rivers, and the Baikal Lake. Right now, these matters are within the national project Ecology. Rivers nurture life, and ancient civilizations were centered around rivers in Eurasia. And speaking about financial aspects, WEB does have ambitious plans, and I will touch upon them, but overall, so far, Russian spending on ecology is about 0.9% of GDP only, which is below the 2 or 3 for developed countries. So I think the costs of the businesses and the population are only about to grow here. And speaking about energy transition overall, we have a strategy for a low greenhouse gas emission transition. We call it a VIP project. A system of monitoring is to be created for emissions and absorption, and to monitor the trends of development of our energy sector. According to our institutes and the forecasting institutes assessments, about 47 trillion rubles are supposed to be spent for energy transition only. And this does not cover all energy efficiency matters, by the way, because the housing and utilities complex account for a lot of emissions right now, actually a larger scale than power plants. And in this regard, forest restoration for CO2 absorption for sinking is also important. Next slide, please. Next slide, if I may. Well, these are some of the curves that were forecast by the Institute of Forecasting and the Academy of Sciences. They show the scenario without proper sinking of CO2 in the left part, and the scenario considering the current technological trends, which means that as the economy grows, the amount of emissions is not likely to be reduced. The scenario where the economy is growing more intensely on the right, accompanied by a considerable sinking of CO2 emissions, will save us almost 1.6 billion tons of CO2 emissions and reduce by 2050 this amount to 500 or 600,000 tons. And given the considerable investments in this area, this will stall our growth and the power will be more expensive. You know, there is a lot of difference in pricing of energy carriers already, and it's not just about the CO2 emissions and their cutting, but it's also about how much it's going to cost. Next slide, please. So this is briefly the national project called Ecology. It envisages the creation of a recycling system and waste management. We are still very much behind the Western countries and their standards, even though yesterday and today we have seen that recycling has progressed a lot, and many uncontrollable landfills have been substituted by relatively ecologically pure waste management plants already. There are also measures aimed at cleaning up the air. About 100 initiatives have been implemented to reduce the emissions of harmful substances into the air. There is also the line of work that concerns biodiversity. I myself am on a the board for this project, but I'm still not sure about how these indicators for biodiversity are truly calculated. Well, the progress is somehow tracked. There's also the forestation aspect of our work. It's a huge amount of work, and in the second part of our session, we'll have presentations on this. A huge part of Russian forests is so-called unmanaged forests, and forest fires are very frequent there. So we are the lungs of the planet, and we carry a lot of renewable potential of economy in this way, but we have not been smart in using it so far. We're not just in the Altai Mountains. National projects are implemented top-down, and they have their own goals and aims in every region. But there are also region bottom-up initiatives. Mikhail Grudinin, for instance, mentioned this in yesterday's panels, and he's here now. Every region also comes up with their own models of environment protection. They are not just ecological, but they are integrated in the noospheric development overall. And they consider issues like, integrating these matters into the development of tourism and development of alternative energy sources. Water, hydropower plants are quite well developed already, but the question is how to capitalize on these principles implementation. How do we make sure it benefits the population of Altai, which so far is one of the poorest in Russia? Next slide, please. And the next slide. Speaking about web in particular. Next slide, please. So I would say that we are only in the beginning of our road. In all of our documents and all of our strategies, we have been underlining our commitment to the principles of sustainable development, but more importantly for people, it's all about the quality of urban life, because WEB has been investing a lot into transport infrastructure, green transport infrastructure, such as trams, trolley buses, and green buses. WEB has been supporting green and adaptation projects related to waste management and recycling and other aspects. Next slide, please. And the next slide. Well, I mean, we could praise ourselves for the money we spend, and we can break it down for SDGs, but next slide, please. However, well, like I said, we are only at the beginning of this road, and we are starting to work not only as a traditional bank, we also look at the return on investments and try to work out a system of assessment for these projects to see first how well they are in line with the green funding principles. We certify our projects. And we also work on the principles of responsible financing that we are to be guided by for web projects, and maybe broadly and maybe in other regions. There's also a presidential instruction on developing so-called standard of social capital. We have been working on it together with other structures, which means that businesses have to become more socially responsible. And this, among other things, will mean that businesses will have to work more with their own staff, assess the effect of these projects, and the government has been thinking of what the carrot would be for such responsible businesses. WEB has been a knowledge source for the development of taxonomies based on the regulatory framework. For green funding, we have issued green bonds. Last year, actually, about 50 billion worth. And we have some assessments as to how these projects have contributed to the reduction of emissions. In any case, we're becoming more green. Next slide, please. Here are just some of the examples of our modern green trams that we introduced to 10 cities of Russia. So, like I said, we are only at the beginning of this work, but I think that changing the very thinking of businesses will mean that we're not just about getting revenues or implementing governmental tasks. It's about really making people's lives better and nature better. I think that's the main thing, and the expertise and the agenda should be maybe brought to the agenda of BRICS and BRICS Development Institutes. Thank you. Thank you, Andrei. I have a question, but I will park it until the end of the session when we have time to talk to all the speakers together. My next question will be addressed to Evgeny. Right, yeah. You have some interesting expertise. On the one hand, there is the public sector, and there's also research activity. And then the third perspective is the commercial sector, and you embrace all of them as a member of the board. So you're at the intersection of the three, and an interesting point of view can be formed given all of these hats you juggle. All the questions will be parked towards the end, right? So my question is, well, it's actually a similar question. So given your functions, what do you think about how we should develop regions taking into account our environmental footprint and biodiversity effect? How do we make it all work together? Thank you so much, Igor. You've put me in a corner here because I realized that likely I won't be able to show you the slides, but yes, please stick to 8 minutes. Yes, well, just interrupt me at any point, but can I still have the slides? And we'll flip through them. Okay, next one. All my life, I've been trying to preserve biodiversity, and this picture shows that any high school student or university student knows that if over 25 or 30% of a territory is deeply transformed, maybe tarmacked, and maybe deeply agriculturalized, then tigers, metaphorically speaking, will not live there. So my whole life I've been trying to solve this dilemma. Next slide. In my opinion, in our country, there's the conflict. The conflict between preservation of biodiversity and economic development is exaggerated because our population is shrinking, or rather it's concentrating in the largest cities. So the general density of the population is quite low. It would be quite easy to manage it. I mean, in Western Europe, density of the population is more or less even. You cannot just redistribute the loci of industrialization. Whereas in Russia, we can do it. Next slide, please. About 30 years ago, the Soviet and Russian geographer Boris Rodoman proposed an almost artistic picture, which is shown here. Third phase of urbanization. In the center, you can see Moscow, and on the top, you can see Tver, Yaroslavl, and Vladimir. And this is what's happening in the European part of Russia. Ideally, people should be settling in residential houses, one-family houses linearly, and agriculture must be following it. And on the border, it should be forestry, preserve, or virginal forests. Next slide. Having said that, we inherited a lot from the previous extensive phase of development. On your right, you can see the picture that shows this degree of neglect of agricultural lands in the central part of European Russia. So you see that, you cannot put forests in place of food security, it seems. But the next slide, please, and more and more. But it's not like this. We're just transitioning from spending budgetary and extra budgetary investments, spreading them thin until up to Murmansk, getting about 4 tons of rye per hectare. But now we're becoming more intensive in our agriculture. And this graph shows that forests have taken out about 70 to have been taking up about 70 to 75% of the agricultural lands previously used, but the export of grain has been grown geometrically.
And Russia has taken the first place in terms of grain exports across the world for the first time in the century. Next slide, please. If you look at the data, not only on the grains, but also generally on agriculture, we've compressed the agriculture sector to the point where it became economically efficient, then became the biggest exporters. Next slide, please. The same story is going down with the forestry. So because in the agriculture, since it's been in private hands, we had a breakthrough, but in the forestry, we're seeing myths fighting together in the heads of our officials. The forestry as an industry in our country has been marginalized. It has been banished to the places where the forest is growing badly. So the forests are trying to take over the abandoned fields in the black earth soil regions, and it's not financially efficiently. And over the recent years, all the forestry farms and companies which were structured in this northern western part of Russia, they emerged in Tatarstan, where they had only 40% of all the forestry. They're operating in Kaluga region, and they've reached top 10. They're just taking over those who rent the land plots, not the owners. Therefore, this allows us to reduce, not us, but them, to reduce the requirements in terms of maintaining biodiversity. So these are those green spots you saw on the maps. Talking about logistics. The delivered distance, since it takes more than 200 kilometers, turns out to be non-efficient. So in Kaluga region, in Smolensk region, in Bashkiria, so the processing area should be not more than 50 kilometers away from the delivery point. Otherwise, it's not efficient. So the indicators I'm dealing with are not really good. So because the money spent on what the officials think is good, they are spent for, and no things are really worth it. We're spending, for instance, hundreds of millions of rubles fighting wildfires, but the number of wildfires is growing still. For instance, in our Kaluga region, we have a project for preserving the forest. We also provide funding as part of this project for fighting wildfires, but we have an approach. So we are planting pine trees in the areas where I think nobody will ever cut down trees there. So these graph demonstrates the area of wildfires. The wildfires in Yakutia, so it costs really nothing, but the most expensive forests are located in the Moscow region. So this says that we're deceiving ourselves in terms of our estimates. Next slide, please. So it vanished, okay. So leave it as is. We have the following situation. In our forestry industry, we're using 25% of all the wild forests. 75% of the wild forests have only environmental function. So this is, they do binding and consuming the carbons, and that's the problem. So on the graph we're seeing this forest-related climate project. In our forestry industry we have worse situation. we're restoring wild forests and then have a negative result. If we cut the autumn trees and then plant monocultures, then the binding of carbon will have a negative connotation compared to the baseline. We need to reform the situation. We took this graph from the company where there is a board of directors who have the understanding of this problem. This is a private company, and they do understand that it's not the way to go. While we keep doing this same thing in the government-owned company, it's quite a question. Just get back to the previous slides. In the mountain Altai, we're talking about the economic significance, etc. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to talk in comfort and calm with the managing director who was Wilding Boden Facility, who was back then Minister of Environment Protection. So because your wild park is one of the most contributing items from the budget in terms of income and profit, we are building 5-star hotels in Hanhase. What for? So that people are able to travel to this national park we are guarding. We are building infrastructure around the national parks so that people are attracted by this. And we are calculating all this. So, and I'm voting for this so that banana plantation, coffee plantation won't take over the national parks. That's the approach we need to use. How to find balance? Yesterday, Dmitry Kabulkin made me really laugh. In good sense of the word. He said that we shouldn't be building infrastructure for tourism just for test purposes. Tens of years ago, me as a private person, without getting in touch with any officials from the National Wild Park Administration, I was traveling across all the national wild parks on the west coast. 8 miles of national park, and the cost per night of the hotel stay is around $40-50. And all the hotels are actually booked out. The closer you reach to the border of the park, the price is growing. So the night at the hotel costs around $100. In national park, if you book a hotel room, it'll cost you $220. It's not the case only for the United States. Great National Kruger Park in Africa. So if you want to stay within the park, the hotel room cost exceeds $200. Then if you're on the border, it'll cost 2 times less. So if we are clever enough and do smart enough, if we understand this, every single territory should be managed according to the functions in priority. We can be successful in both. We can preserve the nature and then ensure economic performance of our infrastructure. I'm happy that the Republic of Altai, which I've been visiting for more than 25 years, is a positive example and a good case for this. Thank you very much. Evgeny, I had a question, but you answered it immediately once you started your presentation. Yes, should I answer it in a more elaborate fashion right now? May I? You have time. You've got a minute. I've been dealing with the preservation of nature for all my life. So I didn't criticize it in the company. It was my favorite. So I'm joking. One day I got a call with an invitation to become a member of the board of directors of this company. But even though that even Rusal switched from traditional agricultural projects to renewal of the Russian local bogs, just making them environmentally friendlier, I believe that it's still a small win. Next question I would address to Dr. Nandi. The climate is changing, and it's changing in the South Asia, particularly. Weather and high temperatures are characteristic to this region, which results in an increased power consumption And I believe my question is about its, so this has an impact on environmental protection programs implementation. To what extent do climate change effects affect all the environmentally protective activities in your country, and what are your plans in terms of environmental protection?
So, Dr. Nandi.
Okay. No, thank you. A very good morning to all of you. And at the outset, I would like to convey my special thanks to the organizer, VEV Institute, for inviting me in this such a great event on environment. So, should I start my presentation? No. Only question answer. Okay. Question answer. Okay. Actually, the environmental issue is a global issue. The South Asian states are not free from these hazards. And South Asian states like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, they have their own environmental policy. But at this time, the major environmental issues are facing by India, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Maldives in different way, though India is a big country, you know, so now India is facing some land erosion problems, some natural disasters in the northern part of India in the Himalayan range. A number of incidents happened in the last few years. So ices are melting, and not only that, another issue of alarming issue is in South Asian states for the rising of the sea level water due to the melting of ices. Another is the growth of population. The South Asian states are moving for industrialization. In most of the cases, the industrialists are not abiding the rules and regulations properly, and they are unable to follow the instructions of the government and the Kyoto Protocol, all the commitment of Rio Summit in 1993. So that is why there is a lacuna between the industrial implementation and the governmental policy. But the government of India has set a goal to make India a carbon-free country, by 2070. But in between, by 2030, India will be able to reduce 40% of carbon emission. And actually, my submission will be in my through my presentation is how India and Russia can jointly play a significant role in reducing air pollution, water pollution, and radiation, and how both countries can play a significant role in sustainable development, how they can be economically beneficial. And first of all, I would like to focus some core areas. Number one is actually we are belong to some common platforms, BRICS, SCO, G20. So in the last G20 meeting, which was conducted by India, and it was held in this month, 9 to 10 September, New Delhi, the basic theme of G20 was one world, one earth, one family, and one future. Yes, we are living in a common world, so we can neglect the such issue of pollution. So global warming is gradually increasing, ices are melting. Not only that, there are some problems of health hazards are actually have noticed in different parts of the globe, especially in South Asia. So if we can't protect our environment, we will not be able to protect ourselves. So this is the common agenda, and basically India is moving for infrastructural developments and planning for set of new satellite cities, and the urbanization process is going on. The lifestyle of urban Indian people has been changed. So carbon dioxide emission, greenhouse gases emission has been increased. So that is actually problem of the implementation of environmental governance. So I think if the both countries can take some initiative in order to implement environmental governance, bilaterally or multilaterally, it would be very good for not only Russia, but not only for India, but for the entire the globe. Another issue is very much pertinent to me, that is waste management. So the way government of India is trying to waste management, this is good. Now government in various cities of India have introduced through their local government to dispose the plastics and other harmful things. And if there is some huge potentiality of investment of Russia to India in waste management. One. Number two is risk management, and that is very important because India is an earthquake-prone country. So many natural disasters happened every year. We had witnessed tsunami also. So after these natural disasters, how the government will act, respond, that is very important. So sometimes it is necessary to take assistance from the other countries if we cooperate to each other, and if we make a joint working group and mechanism to protect our environment, to protect our nature, and after happening of such disaster, if we can take some joint actions, that will be better, not only for saving human being, but also economically viable. Another sector is green energy. Green energy actually includes solar power, biomass, that includes windmills. So in the coastal area of India, now windmills have been popularized. So India is a vast populous country, and the largest populous countries in the world. So government of India is planning to reduce the electric deficiency and energy deficiency. So if India is moving forward to implement solar plants, in many airports of India now have installed the solar panels. So Russia and India can invest together, and Russian investors can go there. This is a very potential area of investment for Russians. So Russian private companies, Russian government can invest there. Another issue is very much important, is oceanic acidification. So not only Indian Ocean, but sea areas of Russia and entire Indo-Pacific region has been now polluted. So due to the emission of oil, burned oil and petro products from the ships, both from warships and merchant ships. So if we can jointly introduce some common mechanism to prevent this thing, so the sea animals and other aquatic environment of the ocean will be saved. So another issue I must say that is very much important, that is area of green technology, apart from solar power and these things. And actually India is now searching for social forestry. India is now emphasizing on ecotourism and eco-friendly environmental system. So yesterday I roamed around this place, and very beautiful place, ALTAI. So if both India and Russia can focus on some ecotourism and eco-friendly projects, then it will be beneficial for tourists, also very beneficial for the economic development of the both countries. So my humble suggestion is, if the Russian NGOs and India's NGOs, if the government of Russia and government of India work together, if they think that they are eagerly waiting to save the world in coming days for the next generation, so both countries should go together because we have a very good relations with Russia since 1971, and this relationship has been enhanced after signing of the Strategic Partnership Treaty in 2000. So we have multilateral, multidimensional relationship. We have some common area of convergence. So Russia is the best partner of India in the present global order. So I think we can cooperate to each other to save our globe and to save our environment. Thank you.
Спасибо. Я бы хотел продолжить тему климата.
Thank you very much. I would like to continue climate topic and its impact on the economic growth. And the next question I would like to address to Mr. Shankar. We are seeing that across the whole world, due to the climate change, we're seeing more natural disasters, be it heat, be it hurricanes, be it floodings. And all of this impacts our processes, economic processes in the first row. Based on your experience, what's the impact of these climate-related processes on the economic sustainability, economic growth, and what do we do as developing countries, as emerging countries, to overcome these crises?
First of all, I would like to thank the organizer and Web Institute for inviting me here to speak before you. So the climate change is a global problem, and it is a real problem. So this is my presentation or question answer? Yes. Yes. Okay. So my topic of
You need to say
presentation
next slide because it doesn't work.
effect of natural disaster on economic growth and environmental sustainability. So if you look, our institute is located in the foothill of the Himalaya in the state of Uttarakhand, and it is very similar to the ALTAI region. It is a very mountainous region and very religious and holy city. So you can visit as the. Okay, working. Okay. So as your conference theme is very good direction. So this is the ecosystem and ecology and sustainable development are global issue, and we should try and we should cooperate to each other to take these things, because due to this there are many events arises, disaster event arises, maybe earthquake, tsunami, landslide. So we have not to disturb our nature. Nature cannot save you if you disturb the nature. So let us see how we make the hazardous event as a disaster. Not all events are disaster, but we make, people make. That is these are the element of risk. So if any place hazard event occur, then they are not dangerous. Only those elements are our built environment which are exposed to the disaster or which is nearest to the disaster, and that will be a risky area. And where the vulnerable element, people, their built environment, their infrastructure, their habitat are there, then they are risky. So we have to estimate, we have to forecast the risk for a particular region, because the main aim of scientists, engineers, and the public and managers is to save the life of people and their property. So we should make collective effort to save these things. So United Nations also taken this step in the terms of this vulnerability and sensitivity and capacity. So natural disasters have significant and complex economic growth and environmental sustainability, and these can vary from the severity of the disaster, what was the magnitude of the disaster, and the preparedness, how we prepared to save the, face the disaster event, and what is the response when the disaster strikes. So there are many key points. The immediate economic contact, short-term economic contraction, long-term economic effect, environmental impact, reconstruction opportunity, insurance, and risk mitigation. So a government response and policy. So not only the government is responsible, each and every people are responsible for these. So if we save life of one people, it is a very good thing. So life of one person is important because you can, your destroyed things, maybe your structure, maybe your built environment, if they destroy on the, during the disaster, you can rebuild. But any person, any casualty occur, you cannot recover that. So important of people is very important. So these are the things you have to keep in mind, and because the slide is very long, so we cannot discuss each and everything. So you can see the effect of disaster on our natural environment, ecological system, and diversity. And this is the disaster management cycle. When the disaster strikes, so you have to prepare before to face that disaster. So if the disaster strikes, then you have to respond to that disaster. You have to make building in such a way that your building could not collapse or crack during the disaster. Then after the rehabilitation, government give the money and to rebuild. Then you start the development of that area. Then you mitigate the risk, and again you prepare for the next event. So this cycle is going on. So natural event, no one can stop the natural event, but we can reduce the risk from that natural disaster. So this is the recorded number of natural disaster from 1900 to 2022. So we are seeing that this is increasing. And this is the natural disaster by type. There are many types of natural disaster: landslide, earthquake, tsunami, many. So this is the natural disaster, many types. So we are seeing that the landslide is the main problem. So we should not develop any area. If you want to develop, then you have to make the sustainable manner. So this is the rate from natural disaster 1990 to 2091, and this is the number of deaths from all natural disasters, including earthquake, volcanic activity, and landslide. This is the decade.
От оползней, которые являются большой проблемой у нас в регионе.
Здесь общемировые цифры по смертности от природных катастроф с 1900 по 2020 год. Это показывает необходимость правильного реагирования и предотвращения таких катастроф. А здесь у нас данные еще по группам доходов населения. Разумеется, в бедных странах больше природных катастроф означает больше разрушений и потерь, включая потери жизни. На слайдах мы видим эти показатели смертности в разбивке по времени. Если сопрягать это все с экономическими показателями, ВВП и ВНП, мы видим, что со временем ущерб для экономического развития от природных катастроф и ущерб для ВВП, соответственно, возрастает. Мы видим, как разрушения в этих странах повлияли на экономическую ситуацию. Этот слайд показывает соотношение риска и неопределенности. Риск предполагает, что есть определенная вероятность катастрофы или убытков от нее, в то время как неопределенность означает, что эта вероятность еще не установлена. При наличии установленного риска можно определить меры реагирования, можно смягчить действие риска. Здесь показан график неопределенности во время катастрофы и после нее. Во время катастрофы риски очень высокие. После же нее в результате реагирования
Post-disaster economic growth scenario we have discussed in the several scenario, and this is the scenario. So it is very difficult to, in its short time, it is discussed. So let us see the sustainability. So some scientists have defined the development is such a way that it cannot undermine the ability of the future generation to meet their need. But in my mind, there should be balance between the responsible spending of the resources. We can just balance our resource, or how much resource we have, we can balance with the nature. So this is the sustainability. Development, sustainability meet the need of the present without negatively affecting the ability of the future generation to meet their need. So this might be decided to rebuild, and why they might decide to relocate.
So we are out of time. So
yes. So this is the environmental effect of the disaster. So these all the disaster, that is the earthquakes, flood, volcano, they jointly form the environmental disaster. And this is the framework of the sustainable development and ecological experience between India and Russia. So there are many things common in India and Russia. That is the environmental challenge, sustainable initiation, and renewable energy. There are so many things common in India and Russia. So we should cooperate to each other and solve these problems, because this climate change, economic growth, due to the disaster, they are global. not one can solve these problems, right? So this is the friendship with Russia. It is not new one. It is a very long back, initiated by our Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So political, cultural, trade, and scientific experiences are common between India and Russia. So in the scientific way, we are also the same, right? Sometimes we get success, sometimes we fail, but we have not stopped our mission. And I am trying to show you that all the disaster, root of all the disaster is the plate tectonics. So when the plate moves, the magma comes out, and there will be some carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide due to the solidification and the erosion, everything. So it goes into the atmosphere. So all the disasters are linked with the plate tectonics. They are natural. And if human intervention just increase in that, their input, it will become the disaster. So now we have seen that Earth is heating up 1.5 or 1.2 global warming. So these are the main pillars: people, property, and protection. So we have to take care, we have to save the life of the people, their property, and their property and people, they must be secure. So we have to make some arrangement by the collaboration, by the friendship, because all people are the same. And nature, everywhere nature is the same. Only we can just changing the, enhancing this problem.
Sorry,
so
is it the final slide?
Okay. So we don't make the known mistake. These are the known mistakes. Everybody know, but they don't follow. So these are some key issues. This plastic and the emissions, industrial emissions, and this junk food we are giving our children. So these things we should keep in mind, and in such a way so that we can find the SDG of the United Nations, 17 goals we can find. And let us try the philosophy of ecologically sound planning in hill development. So we have defined this as in the nature there are two types of energy. Electrical or
so we need some energy. Time for other speakers. Can we
just half a minute. Okay. So we can use the bioenergy, not the atomic energy. If you more we use the bioenergy, we can reduce the atomic energy, and this atomic energy leads to the disorderliness of the nature. So we have to make or create order into the disorder. So these are the conclusions we can see from my talk, and maybe although my talk is very lengthy, but I wanted to give this presentation here so that people may act along these points and these agenda, because these are the global problem. Right. Thank you.
Спасибо за...
Thank you for a very detailed presentation. No more questions for now. I would like to talk to Mr. Tetia. Statistics show, the World Bank statistics in particular, show that the environmental problems cost India about $80 billion per year, which is about 5.7% of GDP every year. And this, among other things, is related to urban pollution. Maybe you could tell us how India has been solving the ecological problems, primarily in big cities. Maybe 8 minutes from you, but not more, okay?
Oh yes, sorry. First of all, I salute the holy land of Altai region, Altai Republic, Bulekha Mountain, Beluka Mountain, Katyn River, people of Altai Republic and Russia, and friends. I'm very grateful for the opportunity given to me to come here, learn many things on ecology and its dimensions. As we all know, human-nature interaction is very, very important. And if it is harmonious, if it is cooperative, I think things can sustain whatever we are talking about sustainable development, that we must leave this planet safer for the future generations. And for that, what kind of efforts are we making through various initiatives, whether in Russia or India and elsewhere? Because problems cannot concentrate. Something is in Delhi that it will not go to Moscow or elsewhere. I think we have to think in a harmonious way together, and only then I think we can save this planet. And with a lot of macro scenarios which are emerging due to global warming, human nature interaction is getting even greater attention, whether through economic momentum, whether through urbanization, whether industrialization, particularly after industrial revolution, how we are going to manage things in environment-friendly way, sustainable way, with the people, is going to decide the future of the planet. Indian government, I'm taking the previous question also together maybe. We have definitely a big challenge to meet the requirements of our growing population. We are second largest urban system after China, and probably we are just close to them, or we almost cross them. The next census will tell us exactly. Our census is going on, that whether we are 1.5 billion or 1.55 billion. So it's a big challenge to manage the waste, to manage all those processes which create problems in environment, greenhouse gases. So Indian government has been trying to address these multiple challenges through multiple initiatives. And we have large number of mission mode programs in cities as well as in other settlements. There is a national mission on solar energy. There is a national mission on green habitats. There is a national mission on protecting Himalayan region, mountain cities. There is a national mission. There are so many national missions. I have a list I can read out. On transport, then habitat, water. Professor Andre was also talking about these issues. We have a mission to look at the water-related issues. We have Satluj, Yamuna action plans, Ganga action plans, how we can keep these rivers. We have very big river systems, and how we can keep these rivers, clean and better for entire, biodiversity. Lot of works are going on. We are constructing large number of treatment plants on the banks of the rivers, so that the clean water is disposed in the rivers under these mission mode programs. There is a mission on Green India. There is a mission on sustainable agriculture. There is a mission on strategic knowledge for climate change. So so many things are going on in cities. We have like Clean India movement, which is called Swachh Bharat Mission. Means all actions related to waste management are being taken under Swachh Bharat Mission, and there are very other programs, Smart City Mission, under which we are trying to improve the mobility, the infrastructure in the larger cities. We have Atal Mission for Urban Rejuvenation and Transformation, which is called Amrut, under which a lot of reforms are being taken for e-governance, for energy, for conservation of resources, for disclosure of information, accountability, transparency. So many initiatives are being taken under these mission mode initiatives. So this is all related to the question. So it's a big challenge with a huge population to meet the requirement of this developing country. We have this challenge to keep the environment also safe, that our economic or industrial processes are environment friendly, our transportation is environment friendly, our energy systems are, we are doing a lot of work in renewable energy and under this energy solar mission. So solar energy is being promoted in my city, Chandigarh. We have huge, all government buildings are covered with solar panels. My institute also, my electricity bill is 0 now. We totally use solar energy. So those kind of things are going on. As far as this small presentation about ecotourism in the Indian Himalayan region of Himachal Pradesh. Himachal Pradesh is a northern province, and it's like mountainous region like ALTAI Republic. We have a lot of similarities. When I was coming from Gorno-Altai airport, I was thinking that I'm traveling in my own country. So it's really great that we are here, and Professor Andre and Professor Vladimir, they invited us for this. This presentation, next please. You can see the beauty, and you can relate with those who have visited different parts of Altai Republic and some other parts of Russia. I hope you will find certain similarities in these Himalayan parts. And I know one lady who has visited, a Russian lady from Moscow. She has visited mountains many times, and she was telling me that Belukha mountain is a very holy mountain, like Kanchenjunga and many other mountains. We pray, we treat them as mountain god. So she was telling me that there is some connection between Belukha mountain and Himalayan mountains like Kanchenjunga, and some spiritual, some religious connections are all. Although I could not talk much, but maybe later I'll definitely talk to her again. Next, please. So these are next.
We have 1 minute.
Yeah. 1 minute. Okay. Yeah. So this is another type of topography. You have green, and then you have snowfall. Next, and ecologically very sensitive areas. Next. How to say next? Yes, we have large number of dams in Himalaya, and which are center of attraction for tourists also. Next. And of course they provide water and other facilities. Pong Dam. This is the cricket stadium at highest altitude in Dharamsala near McLeodganj. McLeodganj is the seat of Dalai Lama, the government of Tibet in exile, and it's a beautiful. Chitkul is the last village near the border of China, and it's a very attractive tourist destination. Thousands of people go there every year. Next. Shimla is the capital of Himachal Pradesh, which is called Queen of Hills, and it's like 7 sisters. There are 7 hills near the city. It has beautiful church and the temple of Hanuman, and this train was started by during British period by the Britishers, and this one of the best trains since it passes through very beautiful landscape from my city almost Chandigarh to is Kalka, little 20 kilometer from my city, to Shimla, and it passes through 103 caves, tunnels, and out and tunnels and on hills. So it's really beautiful to travel by this. So it's one of the major sources of tourist attraction. Lot of tourists go through this, and is next. As Pangi Valley, Chamba district, another region of Himachal Pradesh, it also has a Khasiar Valley, which is called Switzerland, India's Switzerland. Next. Yeah. And Kullu and Manali. Manali is again very, very attractive. Lot of tourist places are there in Manali and in surrounding of the area. Next. There are Buddhist monasteries, large number of monasteries of Buddhist, and huge, religious pilgrim take place. A lot of religious tourists go in the temples and monasteries. Next. These are some other temples. Very huge crowd go to these temples, and in groups, in buses, in cars. Next. We have adventure tourism. We also have a skiing infrastructure in Manali. Like here they are having all season. It's not all season, but seasonal one, and there are many other. Next. Renuka Lake is another center of attraction for tourists. Next. So, next. I just want to show you little statistics also, because you have seen nice pictures. Not everybody is interested in data, but I want to show you some data that number of tourists in Himachal is very high, and millions of tourists go and every year, national as well as international. Next. Next. And it has great potential because flora and fauna, large number of varieties in these three clusters where large number of tourists go is a challenge also to maintain this flora and fauna, to protect it, and these species these species are very, very important for the local.
Dr. Tay, can we share this presentation with the participants?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
I think it's
just
detailed here.
Can you give me one more minute?
One slide.
Next. 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 So a lot of GDP is produced through ecotourism, and from that point of view, ecotourism is important in Himachal Pradesh. A lot of innovations are taking place in terms of managing waste, reducing waste generation. They stopped plastic waste completely in the hilly terrain, and they are having green entry taxes also. They are trying to impose taxes on the tourist, little taxes on entry, and which they try to invest in the green infrastructure and green initiatives like waste management, planting the trees, and other innovations. So I think time is limited, but I have a little more data.
Спасибо.
It generates a lot of employment also. Yes.
Спасибо. Спасибо.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sergey, next question goes to you. My colleagues have already mentioned the need for cooperation in climatic issues. And the BRICS countries overall are quite a significant power in combating climate change. In your opinion, can we, in particular Russia as part of BRICS, work out our own way of protecting the environment in terms of preserving biodiversity and combating climate change? What ideas can you give us? And our colleagues gave us some extra time at my request, but please do stick to the 8 minutes and be concise. Well, to sort of summarize what has already been said by our colleagues, I can tell you that, of course, when we talk about capitalizing on environmental potential, you first need to assess what nature you have. I mean, it sounds kind of a bit mundane, but there is a book by Stiglitz and Senna. We have been assessing our life wrong. It says GDP has not been a proper assessment. Generally speaking, humanity has had trouble adequately assessing its natural resources or humans. I myself say there's nothing free about nature. If it's free, then you pay the costs of destroying it. You pay with your health, you pay with your economy, etc. The first slide relates to what something Andrei has already mentioned. Global Sustainable Development Report was only published 2 weeks ago on the UN website, and I co-authored it. It shows complete failure in the achievement of SDGs. I mean, we have been derouted as humanity, and we're not sure what to do about it. The second slide shows you that it's important that the world is growingly aware of the need to assess natural resources, because if you don't take stock of it, you will just destroy it and not notice. The World Bank report and UN reports are very valuable in this respect, I think. They attempted to include the value of nature in overall assessment of economic solutions and to capitalize on it somehow. In my opinion, if we talk about different approaches to capitalizing environmental potential, we need to proceed from the ecosystem service theory. I will not recall you. There are 4 groups there: the resource, the regulatory, the cultural component, and the environment building, the UN Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework. When I go to ministries, they're very surprised to hear that President Putin back in 2017 already tasked the government with developing a mechanism of compensatory payments for the use of ecosystem services. That was 6 years ago. And I'm afraid that if we poll even our leading ministries that are supposed to be in charge of it, Ministry of Natural Resources or Economy, they will not be aware of ecosystem services that exist and why they need to be paid for. So the problem still persists for Russia. Since I'm pressed for time, I will not dwell in detail on this slide, but you can see that the potential of the BRICS countries is shown here. Actually, Altai as a region, according to ecologists, is one of the biggest values for the planet. I mean, it's an undisturbed ecosystem. And our countries, BRIC countries, have vast expanses of such territories, and they contribute a lot to biospheric stability. Of course, it's about the forests, which we have already mentioned here. Let me demonstrate. There's a forest and marsh potential, lowland and marsh potential of the BRICS countries. India, China, and Russia carry the most potential. And it can be assessed at least in terms of carbon sinking and carbon regulation. I will not delve into details, and yet Brazil also has a lot of potential. And another remark, unfortunately, Russia has yet failed to push forward this environmental argument about the value of ecosystems at UN meetings or COP. If BRICS countries united themselves in an attempt to demonstrate the economic value of their forests, marshes, etc., it would be an important trump card to play. And of course, biodiversity is key. We've already heard the word mentioned. As you follow this economic line of development, you need to be aware of the World Economic Forum gathered in January every year in Davos, and they make reports about the global risks of humanity for the next 10 years. They assess them. And it's the economic elite of the world. It's not the Green parties or somebody else. And among the biggest risks for the next 10 years, 6 were identified as environmental.
Экономисты считают, что главные риски
The economists consider the major risks to be those related to the ecology and environmental protection. And to say it briefly, main areas for environmentalization, if I may put it this way. I believe we've got 1 minute more to talk. We have various aspects which can be discussed not only from the BRICS view, but also from the regional points of view. So first off, all of us would like to transition to this low-carbon future. There are many questions about it. Why, what for, but this environmental assessment in terms of binding the carbon, this is a necessity. Well, we're walking across the ground floor and we saw huge number of cosmetics items, some drugs items sold at the stands. The pharmaceutical industry, cosmetics industry are huge global markets with fantastic money flowing into them. And such regions as ALTAI is very suitable source of wealth for such areas and industries. Talking about tourism as such, it seems to me quite obvious to highlight the ALTAI region, but the economy and those engaged in the economics have evaluated that the travel cost approach of ALTAI region amounts to 50 to 100 million rubles. Evgeny also referred to this cost-based calculation. So my estimate is that every single tourist spends here around 20,000 rubles each. So we're talking about 50 to 100 million rubles potential. Talking about the environmentally friendly atmosphere and area, we need to have clear water, clear air, etc. But we have a situation in Russia, a very sad one. We witness poor regions, but really nice and beautiful nature. And we need to ask the government about how such poor regions can maintain their and preserve their beautiful nature without detriment to their costs and financial situation. So thank you very much for being on time. The last speaker today is Mr. Swain. I would like to continue the topic of cooperation between Russia and India. I'm kindly asking you to share your ideas as regards to on how we can collaborate between our countries on the platform, the basis of climate agenda. So you have 8 minutes at maximum.
Good morning. It's my great honor to be here to participate in these important conferences. Thank you, both Expertise and Research Institute, for these invitations and giving an opportunity particularly to speak on the climate change. Particularly, this is very close to my heart, this topic. So we have 18 biospheres and also 105 conservation parks in India. So we have lots of potentials to collaborate with the Russian friends. So I will discuss details about this particular the collaborations. If it's very limited time, so I will try to finish as early as possible. So the global warming, if you look into the global climate index 2021, this is the report is available. So the climate change impacted in every country. This is not only India, the Russia is less vulnerable, but India is more vulnerable in the terms of the climates. So if you look into the deaths, India is the second highest for mortality for populations in the terms of the climates. So if you look into the data, the research data by the UN, the temperature is rising day by day. And also daily global surface temperature, you will see how it is emerging out of particular is. So what is the context? Context is extreme weather. This is become the new normal. Recent Secretary General of the UN, they warned that the era of global warming has already ended, and also the era of global boiling has already arrived. So we should need the precautions, particularly to taking care of the environment, to taking care of the reserve forest, and taking care of our natural environments. So based on the data, particularly 173 years data set from the 2011, particularly the 15 to 22 data, it witnessed that's the 8 warmest years on the record. So it has observed the global average temperature particularly will be exceed 0.5% what we were agreed in the Paris Agreement, but exactly this also that will be also the increase. So the UN General in the latest meeting, they asked all the countries to put in the particularly push to the reach the net zero emissions, and also every country and plus both in the bilateral and multilateral particular the organizations, they should actually focus on to accelerate the equitable transition from the fossil fuel to renewable energy, while particularly stopping the oil and gas explorations and phasing out the coal by 2040. This was the objective of the world body, the UN. So nowadays, particularly the climate change is taking place in a central place in all the national and international negotiations. So what is the impact? Yes, there is a severe impact of the climate. The droughts becoming more intense and severe. We are experiencing large forest fires, particularly it's occurring mostly out of the season. The time will come, will face the first summer without ice in the Arctic Ocean. It's a very huge impact. And the World Meteorological Organization that predicts 66% of the chance in the next 5 years, the global temperature will temporarily exceed 1.5% thresholds. So this is very alarming. So the speed of the change, we know the speed, but the speed of the change has been already very intensive and severe. So the unbearable heat, cold wave, snow melt, and glacier lake outburst are the negative repercussion to the human being. So it's affect the health security, food security, and all the other things. So what is the impact on India? The first climate assessment report was published by the Ministry of Government of India in the Ministry of Earth Sciences. They have given the clear pictures of the impact of the climate change. So India's average temperature has been rising from 0.7 degrees. The frequency of daily precipitation extremes, that is also 75%. So the frequency and the extent of the droughts of India has increased. So the sea level rise have also increased from North Indian Oceans, occur 3.3 mm per year. So the frequent cyclone is witnessed in India, particularly in the Arabian Sea. We witnessed every year 4 to 5 super cyclones in the particularly part of the East India and the South India. So other study also estimated that the floods are the cause of the estimation loss of the 26.3 billion revenue. And also other study also, the total estimation of the climate change loss is $25 trillion over the next 50 years. That's, oh, this is a huge impact. So we have lots of policies: National Solar Mission, Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency, Mission on Sustainable Habitat, Water Missions, Mission on Sustainable Himalayan Ecosystem, so a mission for Green India, and we also now with the Government of India focusing on the particular the launch of the Mission Life, means particularly taking up the making local bodies environment friendly, saving water, saving energy, and also the reducing e-waste, adopting health lifestyle, and also natural farming, and the promotion of millets. So recently our millets celebration was particularly conducted in the Moscow. So many Russian friends are there participated in the these events. So we have the Eco Club also. The early warning system is one of the steps that are taken by the Government of India to give the information to the in advance. So we have many natural international commitments. We are due to the lack of time I am skipping. I will share this slide with all of you. You can go through on that. So what is the demand? What is the policy? In the recent report published by the Government of India, by 2047, we are just increasing the industry, the consumption of the energy will be increasing in the industrial sector, and we are trying to particularly increase the renewable energy use of the renewable energy in the many folds. So the primary supply, the energy supply in the future of India by 2047, you will see most of the energies will be coming from the renewable energy. So total emissions rate will be reduced.
Sorry, we are out of time, so just concluding.
So just minutes, we have bilateral cooperation. So India, Russia has special and privileged strategic partnership. The relationship is not particularly today. The relationship is coming from the ancient time, particularly the Nikitin was, FPC Nikitin was the ambassador particularly. Our relationship is very rich. So our trade is now manifold. It's reached to 44 USD recently due to the energy resources, fertilizers and other minerals. The Russia is the only country in the world. He has agreement with India in the nuclear power sector, and we have already commissioned many nuclear energy sectors. We are planning also more particularly generating new energy from the nuclear sectors. So what is the prospects? Prospects is we are just going to manifold the traditional relationships. We have the cultural relationship, we have the people-to-people contact. The next year, President Putin have already declared Russian group tourist visa will be free for the Indians. This is the great and welcome step. Definitely India and Russia both people contact will be developed. So we need the energy, renewable energy, then particularly the nuclear hydropower energy. Transport sector, we need to particularly focus on the e-vehicles and energy efficiency. Shipping industry, we need to focus on the commercial and passenger vehicles. Food security, we need particularly the relationship in the focus on the drought-tolerant food grains, how particularly this will be developed in India. So the smart city, forest management, land use, and also the diversified collaboration between Russian research institutes, Russian people, various and multilateral organizations like BRICS, RICS, and ASEO and all, and the Eastern Economic Corridor we should cultivate, and also Chennai, Vladivostok sea route, it will be the game changer for Indo-Russia trade and the yearly solution dialogue of the improvement of the payment and logistics system. Definitely it will be the improved. Thank you so much. Sorry for this.
Thank you. Thank you. К сожалению, у нас нет времени на вопросы.
Unfortunately, we don't have time left for Q&A session. We're joined for a break. We are moving to another conference hall, Irbis. I suggest if you have any questions, please ask them during our next session. Once again, thanks to all the speakers. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to do it in the most efficient manner. The agenda was very intense, but thank you very much again.